The sound of Marcus Thompson's black belt hitting the mat was deafening. Not because it made noise, but because of the complete silence that followed. The cocky third-degree black belt lay motionless, staring at the ceiling, while 34-year-old Elena Vasquez stood over him, her janitor's uniform still perfectly pressed, not even breathing hard. The entire gym held its breath. Before we continue, if you enjoy incredible underdog stories, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. 3 hours earlier, Elena had been invisible. She always was. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, she cleaned the prestigious Phoenix Elite Martial Arts Academy while the advanced students trained. She moved like a ghost between the equipment, wiping down mats, emptying trash cans, mopping floors. Her worn sneakers made no sound on the polished wood. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her brown eyes stayed focused on her work. The students barely acknowledged her existence. To them, she was just part of the furniture, another piece of equipment that kept their elite training facility running. They had no idea that Elena watched everything, every technique, every mistake, every combination. She absorbed it all while scrubbing their sweat from the mats they bled on. Elena needed this job desperately. 3 years ago, her husband David had walked out, leaving her with their 8-year-old daughter Sophia and a mountain of debt. The cleaning job at Phoenix Elite paid just enough to keep their tiny apartment and put food on the table. Sophia was everything to her, brilliant, curious, and unaware of how close they lived to financial disaster every single day. That evening started like any other. Elena arrived at 6 p.m. sharp, changed into her cleaning uniform in the small supply closet that doubled as her office, and began her routine. The advanced class was in full swing under the guidance of Sensei Robert Kim, a respected martial artist who had built Phoenix Elite from nothing into one of the city's premier dojos. Marcus Thompson dominated the center of the mat. 28. Years old, built like a statue, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never truly being challenged. His third-degree black belt was earned through natural talent and expensive private lessons, not struggle. He moved through sparring partners like they were practiced dummies, his technique flawless but somehow lacking soul. As Elena quietly cleaned around the edges of the training area, she noticed Marcus becoming increasingly frustrated with his current sparring partner Jake, the eager but inexperienced brown belt. Jake kept making the same mistake, dropping his guard after throwing a combination. Elena had seen this pattern hundreds of times. She knew exactly how to fix it, but she was nobody, just the janitor. Marcus landed a particularly harsh combination that sent Jake stumbling backward. The brown belt hit the mat hard, his nose bleeding. Instead of helping him up or offering guidance, Marcus stood over him with disgust. "Pathetic," Marcus sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "How did you even make it to brown belt? My little sister hits harder than you." Jake wiped blood from his nose, embarrassment coloring his cheeks. Sensei Kim started to intervene, but Marcus wasn't finished. "Maybe we should get someone more on your level," Marcus said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. His eyes scanned the room and landed on Elena, who was quietly organizing equipment in the corner. A cruel smile spread across his face. "Hey, cleaning lady." Elena froze. Every conversation in the gym stopped. All eyes turned to her. "Yeah, you. Come here." Elena's heart pounded. She looked toward Sensei Kim, hoping he would shut this down, but the instructor seemed curious about where this was heading. Slowly, Elena approached the mat. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, though his tone made it clear he didn't actually care. "Elena?" she replied quietly. "Well, Elena, Jake here needs someone more his speed. Think you can give him a better fight than me?" Marcus's cronies laughed on cue. "I mean, you're here every day. You must have picked up something, right?" The humiliation was designed to entertain his audience and crush Jake's spirit even further. Elena felt the familiar burn of powerlessness she had carried since David left, the same feeling she got when landlords looked down on her, when teachers at Sophia's school treated her like she didn't matter, when the world constantly reminded her of her place. But something else stirred in Elena's chest, something she had buried for years, before Sophia, before David, before everything fell. Apart, Elena Rodriguez had been somebody else entirely. She had been a prodigy. From age 6 to 18, Elena had trained in traditional Muay Thai under her grandfather, Miguel Rodriguez, a former champion who had immigrated from Thailand. Miguel had been strict, demanding, and absolutely devoted to the art. He taught Elena that fighting wasn't about violence. It was about respect, discipline, and understanding yourself completely. Elena had been extraordinary. By 16, she had won 3 amateur championships and was being scouted for professional opportunities. Her grandfather called her Pequeña, Guerrera, little warrior. But when she met David at 18, everything changed. He convinced her that fighting was unladylike, that she needed to focus on being a proper wife and mother. Gradually, she stopped training. She let that part of herself die. Now, standing in front of Marcus's smirking face, that dead part of Elena began to stir. "I don't think that's appropriate," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Come on," Marcus pressed, sensing weakness. What's the worst that could happen? Jake might actually win something for once." More laughter from his followers. Elena looked at Jake, still bleeding, still humiliated. She saw something in his eyes that reminded her of Sophia when kids at school made fun of her secondhand clothes. That look of someone who had been made to feel small. "Fine," Elena said quietly. The word surprised everyone, including Elena herself. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? Oh, this is perfect." He turned to the class. "Everyone gather around. This is going to be educational." Sensei Kim stepped forward. "Maybe we should—" No, Marcus interrupted. She agreed. "Besides, I'll go easy on her. Just a light sparring session. Show her some basic techniques." His grin was predatory. Elena looked down at her cleaning uniform, a simple navy blue polo shirt and matching pants. Not exactly fight gear, but it would have to do. She kicked off her worn sneakers and stepped onto the mat in her socks. The students formed a circle around them. Elena could hear whispered conversations, some concerned, others excited for the show. Marcus began stretching elaborately, playing to his audience. "Okay, cleaning lady, here's how this works," Marcus announced loudly. "I'm going to throw some light punches and kicks. You try to block them or get out of the way. Think of it as a free lesson. Maybe you'll learn something useful." Elena nodded silently and took a basic fighting stance. Her form was decent, better than Marcus expected, but he assumed she had picked it up from watching classes. "Ready?" Marcus asked, bouncing on his feet. Elena nodded again. Marcus threw a lazy jab toward Elena's face, expecting her to flinch or stumble backward. Instead, she slipped the punch with minimal movement, her head tilting just enough to let it pass by her ear. Marcus blinked. That was unexpected. He threw another jab, a little faster this time. Elena slipped it again, even more smoothly. "Beginner's luck," Marcus muttered, but his confidence flickered slightly. The third punch came harder and faster. Elena didn't just slip it, she caught it. Her hand moved like lightning, trapping Marcus's extended arm at the wrist. For a split second, their eyes met, and Marcus saw something that made his stomach drop. Elena's brown eyes were completely calm, focused, and absolutely fearless. Elena released his arm and stepped back into her stance. Marcus's face flushed red. The laughter from his friends had stopped. The room grew quiet. "Lucky grab," Marcus said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Let's see how you handle this." He threw a combination. Jab, cross, hook. Elena moved like water, flowing around each strike without apparent effort. Her movements were economical, precise, beautiful. She wasn't running from the punches. She was dancing with them. Marcus stepped back, breathing harder than he should have been after such light work. Something was very wrong here. This wasn't possible. She was just a janitor. "Stop playing around," Marcus snapped more to himself. Then to Elena. His next combination came with real force and intention. Jab, cross, hook, roundhouse kick. A sequence that would overwhelm most brown belts. Elena slipped the first two punches, ducked under the hook, and caught the roundhouse kick with both hands. Time seemed to stop. She held Marcus's leg in the air, supporting his entire balance, and looked him directly in the eyes. In that moment, Marcus Thompson realized he had made a terrible mistake. Elena didn't throw him. She simply let go of his leg, allowing him to hop backward awkwardly, his balance completely gone. The humiliation was worse than any physical punishment could have been. The silence in the gym was deafening. Even Sensei Kim stood motionless, his mouth slightly open. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Marcus's face went through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous purple. His humiliation transformed into rage. "You think you're clever?" Marcus snarled. "Fine. No more games." What happened next changed everything. Marcus launched himself forward with genuine killing intent. This wasn't sparring anymore. This was an assault. His punches came in combinations of 6 and 7, each one thrown with the full force of his 200 pounds. His feet moved in perfect timing, setting up angles for devastating kicks. This was Marcus Thompson unleashed, fighting like his reputation depended on it. Because it did. Elena moved like she was in a different dimension. She flowed between Marcus's strikes like smoke, never where he expected her to be. Occasionally, she would redirect one of his punches with a gentle touch, sending him stumbling past her. She wasn't fighting back. She was demonstrating the difference between violence and art. Marcus threw everything he had learned in 10 years of training. Flying knees, spinning back fists, axe kicks that could break boards. Elena avoided them, all with an economy of movement that was almost insulting. She used the minimal energy necessary to stay safe while Marcus exhausted himself against empty air. After 2 minutes of this deadly dance, Marcus stopped, gasping for breath. Sweat poured down his face. His perfect hair was disheveled. His expensive jai was soaked through. Elena stood across from him, her breathing unchanged, her janitor's uniform still neat and clean. "Had enough?" Elena asked quietly. The question broke something inside Marcus. He had been made to look like a fool in front of everyone who mattered to him. His status, his reputation, his entire identity was built on being the best fighter in this gym. This couldn't be happening. Marcus reached deep into his reserves and found one last surge of energy fueled by pure humiliation and rage. He charged, forward with a devastating combination that would have hospitalized most people, a set-up jab followed by a murderous uppercut aimed directly at Elena's chin. Elena didn't slip this punch. She didn't redirect it. Instead, she stepped forward into Marcus's attack. As the uppercut came toward her face, Elena's left hand moved in a perfect arc, deflecting the punch outward while her right hand shot forward in a short, precise strike to Marcus's solar plexus. The technique was called plum clinch counter in traditional Muay Thai, a move her grandfather had made her practice 10,000 times. Marcus's own momentum worked against him. Elena's deflection sent his uppercut wide, while her counterstrike landed with surgical precision. The breath exploded from Marcus's lungs as his diaphragm spasmed. His legs turned to water, and he collapsed to the mat like a marionette with cut strings. Elena stood over him, looking down with something that might have been pity. "The problem with your technique," Elena said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather, "is that you rely too much on strength and not enough on timing. You telegraph your combinations, your footwork is sloppy when you're tired, and you drop your left hand after throwing your cross." Marcus tried to speak, but could only produce a wheezing sound as he struggled to breathe. Elena knelt beside him, her voice becoming gentle. "You're not a bad fighter, Marcus, but you've never been humble enough to truly learn. Strength without wisdom is just violence. Speed without control is just chaos." She stood and looked around the silent gym. Every face stared back at her with a mixture of shock, awe, and something approaching fear. "Jake," Elena called to the brown belt who had started this whole confrontation, "your problem isn't your power. It's your recovery. After you throw a combination, you drop your guard and your feet stop moving. Stay light on your feet and keep your hands up. You're better than you think you are." Jake nodded mutely, too stunned to speak. Elena walked to the edge of the mat where she had left her shoes. As she bent to put them on, Sensei Kim found his voice. "Elena," he said carefully, as if speaking to a dangerous animal, "where did you learn to fight like that?" Elena straightened up, her shoes back on, looking once again like an ordinary janitor. "My grandfather taught me Muay Thai when I was young, but that was a long time ago." "Your grandfather," Sensei Kim repeated. "What was his name?" "Miguel Rodriguez." The color drained from Sensei Kim's face. Miguel Rodriguez was a legend in martial arts circles, a former champion who had trained several world-class fighters before disappearing from the scene decades ago. "You're Miguel Rodriguez's granddaughter?" Sensei Kim's voice was barely a whisper. Elena nodded. "He used to call me his little warrior, but I stopped training when I got married. I haven't fought in 16 years. She picked up her cleaning supplies and started to walk away, but Sensei Kim's voice stopped her. "Elena, wait." She turned back to face him. Would you consider teaching here? We could use someone with your skills. The pay would be much better than..." He gestured vaguely at her cleaning supplies. For a moment, Elena's carefully controlled expression cracked. Hope flickered across her face before being replaced by doubt. "I don't know if I'm qualified to teach. It's been so long, and I was never a professional fighter. I'm just..." "Just what?" Sensei Kim interrupted. "You just demonstrated more skill in 5 minutes than most people develop in a lifetime. You controlled that entire fight without hurting anyone. That's not just technique. That's mastery." Elena looked around the gym. The students were still staring at her, but their expressions had changed. The dismissive looks were gone, replaced by respect and curiosity. Even Marcus, who had managed to sit up and was slowly getting his breath back, was watching her with something approaching admiration. "I'd have to bring my daughter sometimes," Elena said hesitantly. "I can't afford a babysitter every day." "That's fine," Sensei Kim said immediately. "She can do homework in the office. Hell, she can train if she wants to." I didn't just know Elena thought about Sophia, brilliant and strong, but growing up thinking she was powerless because that's what the world had taught her. She thought about the stack of overdue bills on her kitchen table. She thought about her grandfather, who had spent his life teaching respect and discipline through martial arts. She thought about the woman she used to be and the woman she could become again. "When would I start?" Elena asked. The smile that spread across Sensei Kim's face was brighter than the gym's fluorescent lights. "How about tomorrow?" That night, Elena sat at her small kitchen table, helping Sophia with her math homework. The bills were still there, still overdue, but they didn't seem quite as insurmountable anymore. "Mom," Sophia said, looking up from her fractions worksheet, "you seem different tonight. Happy different." Elena smiled and smoothed her daughter's dark hair. "I got offered a new job today, Mika, teaching people how to fight." Sophia's eyes widened. "You know how to fight?" "I used to. My grandfather taught me when I was your age. Maybe I'll teach you too, if you want to learn." "Could I really?" Sophia's voice was full of wonder. Elena nodded. "Fighting isn't about hurting people, baby. It's about being strong, being confident, and never letting anyone make you feel small." Sophia grinned and threw her arms around her mother's neck. "I want to learn everything." As Elena held her daughter, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, tangible hope for a better future. She thought about Marcus Thompson lying on that mat, learning humility for perhaps the first time in his life. She thought about Jake, who would train harder now that he knew his problems, had solutions. She thought about all the students she could help, all the confidence she could build, all the bullies she could humble. But mostly, she thought about the little girl in her arms who would grow up knowing that being underestimated wasn't a weakness. It was a secret weapon. The next morning, Elena walked into Phoenix Elite Martial Arts Academy at 9 a.m. sharp. She wasn't carrying cleaning supplies. She was carrying a small gym bag containing her grandfather's old training gear she hadn't touched in 16 years. Sensei Kim met her at the door with a cup of coffee and a smile. "Ready for your first day, Sensei Elena?" Elena Rodriguez, granddaughter of champions, mother of Sophia, former janitor, and current martial arts instructor, smiled back. "I've been ready my whole life." 6 months later, Phoenix Elite had a waiting list for Elena's classes. Her students learned more than just technique. They learned respect, discipline, and the difference between strength and violence. Marcus Thompson became one of her most dedicated pupils, having discovered that true confidence came from constant learning rather than constant winning. Jake earned his black belt in record time, his technique flawless and his spirit unbreakable. Sophia. Rodriguez trained 3 times a week and had already won 2 junior tournaments. She carried herself with quiet confidence and never let anyone make her feel small. And Elena? Elena had found herself again. She was no longer invisible, no longer just surviving. She was thriving, teaching, and building something beautiful from the ashes of her old life. But the transformation wasn't just about Elena. The ripple effects of that one evening spread throughout the entire martial arts community. Word spread quickly about the janitor who had humbled a 3rd-degree black belt without breaking a sweat. Within weeks, martial arts instructors from across the city were visiting Phoenix Elite, curious to see the woman who fought like a ghost and taught like a sage. Elena's teaching philosophy was unlike anything the students had experienced before. Where other instructors focused on aggression and dominance, Elena taught patience and precision. She would spend entire classes on breathing techniques, explaining that a fighter who couldn't control their breath couldn't control anything else. Her students learned to see violence as a last resort, not a first option. One particular evening, 3 months after the incident with Marcus, a new student arrived at the gym. Vincent Shaw was a professional MMA fighter with a reputation for brutality both inside and outside the cage. He was suspended from his league for excessive aggression and had been court-ordered to take anger management classes. His lawyer had suggested martial arts training as part of his rehabilitation. Vincent stood 6'4" and weighed 260 pounds of pure muscle. His arms were covered in tattoos depicting skulls and flames, and his face bore the scars of countless fights. When he walked into Phoenix Elite, conversations stopped. The air itself seemed to grow heavier. Sensei Kim met with Vincent privately before his first class, explaining the gym's philosophy of respect and discipline. Vincent nodded along, but his eyes held no warmth. He was here because he had to be, not because he wanted to learn anything. Elena's intermediate class was in session when Vincent emerged from the office. The students were practicing flow drills, smooth combinations of strikes and blocks performed at half speed to perfect technique. Elena moved among them like a conductor leading an orchestra, making small adjustments to form and timing. Vincent watched from the sidelines, his expression contemptuous. To him, this looked like dancing, not fighting. Real fighting was about power, intimidation, broken bones. This artsy-fartsy stuff was for people who had never felt the rush of dropping an opponent with a single punch. When the class ended, Elena approached Vincent with the same calm demeanor she showed everyone. "You must be Vincent. I'm Elena Rodriguez. Welcome to Phoenix Elite." Vincent looked her up and down dismissively. "You're the instructor? You look like somebody's mom." Elena smiled. "I am somebody's mom. Would you like to try a private lesson to assess your current skill level?" But Vincent's laugh was harsh and ugly. "Lady, I've been fighting professionally for 8 years. I don't need to be assessed by someone who teaches yoga with punches." The other students had lingered after class, sensing tension. Marcus Thompson, now one of Elena's most devoted pupils, stepped forward. "Vincent, you should listen to her. She's what?" Vincent cut him off. "Some suburban soccer mom who thinks she knows how to fight. I've seen your type before. All technique. No heart. No killer instinct." Elena remained perfectly calm. "You're absolutely right, Vincent. I don't have a killer instinct. But I'm curious. What brings you to martial arts? Are you looking to become a better fighter, or are you just here because a judge told you to be?" Vincent's face darkened. The question hit too close to home. "I'm here because I have to be. But don't expect me to pretend this kindergarten stuff is real fighting." "What's real fighting to you?" Elena asked genuinely. "Real fighting is about breaking your opponent before they break you. It's about being the scariest person in the room. It's about power." Vincent's voice grew louder with each word. "Real fighting is about making sure nobody ever messes with you again." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. You've been hurt before, and you learned that being feared was safer than being vulnerable." Vincent's eyes flashed dangerously. "Don't psychoanalyze me, lady. You don't know anything about me." "You're right," Elena admitted. "But I know something about fighting. Would you like to see?" Before Vincent could respond, Elena moved. Not toward him, but toward the heavy bag hanging in the corner. She took a simple stance, breathed deeply, and threw a single punch. The sound was like thunder. The 100-pound bag swung violently, its chain creaking under the sudden force. Elena had hit it with such precision and power that the impact reverberated through the entire gym. Vincent's mouth dropped open. That punch had more force behind it than anything he had ever thrown, and Elena had made it look effortless. "Power without control is just destruction," Elena said, turning back to face Vincent. "Control without wisdom is just technique. But wisdom, control, and power together? That's art." She walked back to where Vincent stood, still stunned. "I'll make you a deal, Vincent. Train with me for 1 month. Really train, not just go through the motions. If after 30 days you still think this is kindergarten stuff, I'll personally write a letter to your probation officer saying you completed your requirements." Vincent looked around the gym. Every student was watching him, waiting to see what he would do. His pride told him to walk away, to find some other gym where they would appreciate his aggressive style. But something in Elena's eyes made him pause. It wasn't fear or disgust. It was genuine interest, as if she saw something in him worth developing. "Fine," Vincent said, finally. 1 month. But when I prove you wrong, I want that letter." Elena smiled. "Deal." Vincent's first real lesson was humbling in ways he didn't expect. Elena didn't try to match his aggression or prove her dominance. Instead, she began with basics: proper stance, breathing, balance. Things Vincent thought he had mastered years ago. He was wrong. Elena showed him how his stance, while intimidating, left him vulnerable to sweeps and throws. She demonstrated how his breathing pattern, designed to psych out opponents, actually reduced his endurance and clouded his judgment. She corrected his hand positioning, his foot placement, his shoulder alignment. Most surprisingly, she did it all without making him feel stupid. Elena had a gift for pointing out flaws in a way that felt like unlocking potential rather than highlighting failures. By the end of the first week, Vincent's skepticism began to crack. His technique was improving noticeably, but more importantly, his anger was becoming manageable. Elena's breathing exercises actually worked. When he felt rage building, he could use her techniques to center himself instead of exploding. The breakthrough came during week 3. Vincent was sparring with Marcus Thompson, who had become something of a legend in the gym for surviving Elena's teaching methods. Vincent threw one of his signature combinations, a brutal series of punches designed to overwhelm opponents through sheer violence. Marcus didn't run from the assault. Using Elena's techniques, he flowed around Vincent's strikes like water around rocks, occasionally redirecting punches that came too close. Vincent exhausted himself against empty air while Marcus remained calm and centered. When Vincent finally stopped, gasping for breath, Marcus stepped forward and tapped him lightly on the shoulder. "Good combination," Marcus said sincerely. "But Elena taught me that fighting angry is like driving blind. You have all the power in the world, but you can't see where you're going." For the first time in years, Vincent felt something other than anger or contempt toward another fighter. He felt respect. Elena had been watching from across the gym, working with other students but keeping one eye on Vincent's progress. She approached as Vincent sat on a bench, toweling off sweat and processing what had just happened. "How do you feel?" Elena asked. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "Different," he said finally. "I felt controlled, like I was choosing my attacks instead of just throwing everything and hoping something landed." Elena sat beside him. "That's wisdom beginning to work with power. You're learning to be a martial artist instead of just a fighter." "What's the difference?" Vincent asked. "A fighter tries to defeat opponents. A martial artist tries to defeat the need for fighting. A fighter builds walls around their heart. A martial artist builds bridges to understanding." Elena paused. "Both can be effective, but only one leads to peace." Vincent looked around the gym, seeing it with new eyes. The students weren't just learning to fight, they were learning to be better people. Jake helped newer students with techniques he had struggled with months earlier. Marcus, once arrogant and cruel, now encouraged everyone and celebrated their improvements. Even Sophia, Elena's 8-year-old daughter, trained with a maturity and respect that put some adults to shame. She was already showing incredible promise, but more importantly, she carried herself with quiet confidence and treated everyone with kindness. "Your daughter," Vincent said, nodding toward Sophia as she practiced forms in the corner. "She's going to be something special." Elena's face lit up with pride. "She already is, but training here has given her something I never had at her age, the knowledge that she's strong enough to protect herself and wise enough to know when. Protection is necessary." Vincent watched Sophia complete a complex sequence of movements with perfect balance and control. "I wish I had learned that when I was her age. Maybe things would have been different." "It's not too late to learn it now," Elena said gently. By the end of the month, Vincent Shaw was a different man. He still possessed all of his physical power, but now it was tempered with control and wisdom. His anger management issues had disappeared entirely, replaced by a centered calm that served him, better than rage ever had. On his last required day, Vincent approached Elena after class. "I owe you an apology," he said. "And a thank you. I came here thinking you were going to waste my time with feel-good nonsense. Instead, you gave me something I didn't even know I needed." "What's that?" Elena asked. "Peace." Vincent's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "For the first time in my adult life, I feel at peace with myself." Elena smiled. "That's the real victory, Vincent. Conquering yourself is harder than conquering any opponent." Vincent nodded, then surprised Elena by bowing deeply, the traditional sign of respect between martial artists. "Sensei," he said formally, "would you accept me as a permanent student? I'd like to keep learning." Elena returned his bow. "It would be my honor, Vincent." 6 months later, Vincent Shaw returned to professional MMA fighting. But he was a completely different fighter. Where he had once relied on brutal aggression, he now fought with surgical precision. His opponents found themselves facing not a berserker, but a master craftsman who could control the pace and flow of every encounter. More importantly, Vincent had become a role model outside the cage. He started a program teaching martial arts to at-risk youth, passing on Elena's lessons about turning strength into wisdom. His transformation became legendary in MMA circles, and many fighters began seeking out Elena Rodriguez for the kind of training that could change not just technique, but character. The story of Elena's emergence from invisibility continued to ripple outward. Phoenix Elite became a pilgrimage site for martial artists seeking something deeper than just fighting skills. Elena's reputation grew beyond the local community, reaching national martial arts magazines and online forums. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in Elena herself. The scared, powerless woman who had cleaned floors while watching others live their dreams was gone. In her place stood a master teacher, a loving mother, and a woman who had reclaimed her power not through revenge or bitterness, but through service to others. Every evening, as Elena locked up the gym after the last class, she would stand for a moment in the center of the mat where everything had changed. She could still see Marcus Thompson lying there, stunned and humbled. She could still feel the moment when her old self died and her true self was reborn. Sometimes, the most extraordinary people are hiding in the most ordinary places. Sometimes, a janitor is really a warrior who just forgot how to fight. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment of courage to transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. Elena Rodriguez learned that being underestimated wasn't her weakness. It was her superpower. She taught an entire gym that true strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up every single time and then helping others do the same. She proved that the most powerful victories aren't won through violence, but through the quiet revolution of becoming exactly who you were meant to be.